Welcome to Real Estate Exposed, helping people in San Diego buy, sell, and refinance their biggest investment, delivering you timely truths, exposing important issues, and helping you get into the right home. Here are your hosts, real estate expert Daniel Beer, top-ranked professional by sales volume at one of San Diego's largest brokerages, and his mortgage partner, Todd with over $2 billion in funded loans.
$2 billion in funded loans. Todd and Home Street Bank. That's why we align ourselves with this guy. How's it going, buddy?
It's going good. It's a great, beautiful Sunday, and I have a question. So how many units are you going to end the year with this year?
Well, we're tracking toward roughly 131, which actually falls short of our goal of 133. So,
well, then you're fired. You're fired.
Thank you.
You're fired.
So we're gearing up here to see what we can do and end the year.
And what is that dollar? What's that dollar volume? You think
we'll close out about $102.5 million, and that number we know a little more firmly because most of what we're booking now isn't going to close until January.
Right.
So there'll be about $102.5 million of real estate sold this year, and really proud of everybody at the Daniel Beer Group at Windermere. It's been awesome, man. It's been an awesome ride, and we're going to have all kinds of new surprises and value to add, and just what we're going to bring our clients for 2016. It's going to be really killer. So we're thrilled.
I'm super excited for 2016, and we have a special guest in the studio today. I cannot believe that he came back. Brian, Danney, our Daniel Beer Group buyer specialist.
Yes, hello everybody again. Thank you for having me back. Happy to be here and getting to the bottom of real estate and just talking a little bit about what's going on out there.
So
we got so many calls when Brian was here. Do you realize that? I mean, Brian really, last time Brian was in the studio, he pulled the veil back exactly of what he does and why he is a buyer specialist. But I think we should save that for after the break because Brian and I really want to talk about what's happening in 9 days, and you have no interest in it.
All right, so what's going on, Todd?
9 days, Brian. What's going to happen in 9 days?
No, Star Wars cannot wait.
All right, we're going to move on to the next topic now. Moving on to the next topic. Seriously, what's going on in the political world? Because Trump has been making some big statements, and look, this is Real Estate Exposed. We do keep track of the political climate as we would be wise to do, given that everything trickles down, and real estate specifically is so sensitive to what's going on in the markets and politically. What's happening? What is this guy saying? Because he's making some pretty dramatic statements, and really statements that could change the fabric of what America's about.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if he's being misconstrued in the media or not being misconstrued in the media. He's basically saying that, Muslims should not be allowed in the country. And what he's meaning by that is if they leave, I watched him on the news the other night. He said that let's say a Muslim decides to leave and go to Saudi Arabia or to wherever. They leave the country and they want to come back, but they've gone to a Middle Eastern country. We shouldn't, even though they're U.S. citizens, we shouldn't allow them back into the country. The reason why he's saying that is that in San Bernardino, the wife left the U.S., went to a Middle Eastern country, and when she came back and then she recruited her husband. This is what's being said in the media, and she recruited her husband, and to ISIL or ISIS or however you want to call it, whatever you want to call it. So what he's saying is, if they leave and they go somewhere that's a hotbed for
terrorism,
that we shouldn't allow them back into the country.
And if they leave and they leave for a certain amount of time, because I have to imagine you have to even. Look, first off, this thing has all kinds of big implications, and there's a lot of stickiness. There's a lot to it. But even he must be allowing for people to revisit their home, visit uncles, visit grandparents, visit cousins, and come back, right?
Yeah.
Is it leaving for an extended period of time?
I think he means by extended period of time, and he's also prefaced it by saying servicemen and women who work, are in the military, he's not, who are Muslims, he's not saying they can't come back. I think it's more, a serious period of time.
It'll be interesting to track it. In studio, though, what we do have is Brian Danney, buyer specialist at the Daniel Beer Group. And here's why we brought him in. Remember, it's the month of December, and what we're doing here on Real Estate Exposed is we are bringing you the biggest, questions, the most popular comments, the biggest sticking points and uncertainties, the myths, etc., that people have brought to us, whether it be to Todd at Home Street or us at the Daniel Beer Group. What are buyers asking? What are sellers asking? What's on their mind? What are their concerns? And how will that affect you in 2016? What are the trends? What's the industry doing? And so we're addressing those biggest questions. And one of the questions we get on a fairly frequent basis now, as the general population starts becoming aware of this role that we call the buyer specialist. And so we get the question, what is a buyer specialist? What, I've never heard of it, or I just saw it on, HGTV. What does it mean? Do I need one? Do you need a buyer specialist?
$1 million listing, right?
Yeah. Do you need one if you're considering a purchase? And so what we've done is actually ask Brian Danney, who is the county's top buyer specialist, and he happens to be part of the Daniel Beer Group. We've asked him to come into studio so we could address the question. Brian, what is a buyer specialist? Why does someone need one? What does it even mean? And is there more cost to it? Is there an advantage? Is there a disadvantage? Walk us through it, please.
Yeah, no, I'll answer that last question first. There is no cost whatsoever. When we a lot of deals in San Diego County, I can tell you, 98% of them both have a buyer's agent and a seller's agent, and representing both parties. Something that we do is we only specialize in working with myself and a few of the other buyer's agents on our team. We only work with the buyers, so we do not work with the sellers. It's really important to understand that, because what we do is we spend all of our time trying to find the right product for our clients. And, they have someone they can go to. They have someone representing them from the start, and there isn't any there aren't any issues with representing. Another thing is...
So, Brian, can I ask on that point? So, let's say I want to sell my house. Will you list my house?
No, not at all. Dan, who works on the listing side, would certainly be able to.
So
to
Dan's
help you
a
with
listing
that.
specialist.
Yes.
So basically, what you're doing is it's the Daniel Beer Group has kind of compartmentalized their team.
Exactly.
So you only handle buyers. So even if I like you, even if I think that I like you better than Dan, and I want to list my house.
Well, we know that, but
I want to list my house.
Listen,
Thank you.
For years and years and years, sellers have been hiring a listing agent to list their house. Okay,
and to sell and to buy a house.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Why should it be any different? Why shouldn't a buyer hire a buyer specialist to help them find the right home for them and their family?
That's the biggest thing that always got to me, and why we structured the team this way. And buyers are still operating the way, if you're out to buying a home, it's likely you're still operating, honestly, the way we would have done things 50 years ago. Or it's just an outdated way and a limiting way of thinking about how you want to find your representation. Now,
so can I ask,
to walk you through
wait,
here,
I have a question to ask you, though. But if I'm a realtor and I make money listing homes and I make money by selling you a home, well, I mean, you as the founding partner of the Daniel Beer Group, the founder of the Daniel Beer Group, why did you decide? Because I'm assuming that Brian's not working for free.
Because it's about delivering our clients value, Todd. Sellers for years, forever. I mean, for as long as I'm aware of.
Right.
Okay, so let's call it decades and decades.
Right.
They want to sell their home. What do? A seller will hire somebody who's dedicated to the sale of their property, somebody who has a fiduciary responsibility to them and only them, an agent that is their purpose is to represent them on the sale of that property, no matter who that is going to bring that buyer, and have that person's interest at heart. They're out trying to find the market for the home, the buyer, and they're marketing the property. They're going out to find that buyer, right? Represent it on behalf of the seller.
Hopefully,
and that's,
hopefully,
yes.
Right.
So the buyer, however, and sometimes it's that same person. They sell their house, but the buyer, what do? They wander from open house to open house. They make, inquiries on Zillow. They talk to 5 different agents. They call a sign. They drive down the road. They call another sign. Frankly, just very logically speaking, all you could hope to get as far as representation in that scenario is average at best. And here's why. The best agents, the Brian Danneys of the world, people that have dedicated great clients that they're working for, the best agents will only work with people that are dedicated back to them. And so when you're going from sign to sign or from open house to open house, and you tell everybody, hey, well, if you find me the right property, I'll work with you.
Right.
The only people that will dedicate even a minute of time to you are the people that are desperate and honestly have no other business. And the reason they might not have other business is because they might not be so great at what they do. And I'm just speaking boldly and frankly, but this is the darn truth.
Well, one of the things I have to say is that, we always have a joke with Brian because we get a lot of business from Brian. And Brian, we always tease Brian about the one and done. And one of the things I love that you do, Brian, is that you don't show people. I mean, you show them tons of houses, but you actually, your process is pretty intricate.
It is.
You get
Dan. When you sit down with someone, I have a question. You have a marketing plan, right? Like you have a strategy you go through
when we're selling their home.
Mm-hmm. Why should it be any different on the buy side?
That's right.
So
that's exactly right. Somebody has to sit with you, put a blueprint together.
That's right. It's about the blueprint. It's where we're going to go from A to B to Z. It's understanding everything and what we're going to do to accomplish that.
And Brian, if you were operating like most other agents out there, okay, so if your buyers, if the person you're trying to have help you buy a home was operating like most other agents out there, which is that they're trying to wear all hats, they're trying to do their marketing, represent sellers, drive people to see homes, handle their transactions. Brian, if you were trying to wear all hats, what kind of service could you possibly give your buyers?
Terrible. How you need a special? Dan, let me ask you this: if you want to get your teeth cleaned, do you go to your physician or do you go to a dentist?
I go to a specialist.
Okay, exactly.
Okay, so to answer the question that we get so frequently, the reason that the buyer specialist role exists and it's evolving, and no, we're not the only group out there that uses it, but it is, if you see a buyer specialist out there, it's somebody that business, that team, that group has realized that to serve you, like if you want to see more than just the next home that hits Zillow and every other website, if you want to be ahead of the market, if you want somebody that's actually out digging for you and is actually working as if you've hired them to do a very important job, then you must hire somebody who's dedicated to the craft, to the art of buyer representation, somebody that negotiates on behalf of buyers day in, day out, somebody that's digging for property day in, day out. That's the only way to properly serve yourself. Otherwise, you're getting what everybody else gets, which is, you're simply wearing all. You're getting somebody who's trying to do a little bit of everything and doesn't do it all so
right?
well.
Basically, it's self-service because I know in the past when I've worked with.
Let me see that home that just hit Zillow. Sure, let me open the door for you.
Exactly.
You're just working with the door open or otherwise. If you want to connect with a Brian Danney, if you want to explore the world of buyer representation, and find out how can you actually get ahead of the best properties before everybody else, the number to call is 800-676-2420. That's our line here. Brian Danney at the Daniel Beer Group. You could also find us on Zillow, look at what I said. You could also find us on Facebook. Well, heck, you can find us on Zillow, and you'll see all of our awesome reviews, actually.
Facebook, LinkedIn, Real Estate Exposed on LinkedIn, the Dan Beer Group on LinkedIn, Facebook, Dan Beer Group, San Diego Homefinder.com. You can find them everywhere.
800-676-2420. That's 800-676-2420. Coming up next, we're going to be discussing we're going to be discussing something that Todd really wanted to bring to the table here today. We're back with you here, Real Estate Exposed on News Radio 600 KOGO. It's Todd Pianin at Home Street Bake. I'm Daniel Beer. Daniel Beer at the Daniel Beer Group. If you want to connect with us, if you have a question that doesn't get answered on today's show, you would want to reach out. The number's 800-676-2420. You could reach Todd or I directly using that number, and we'll get right on the phone with you. The number's 800-676-2420.
So what I really want to go into, which we skipped over a little bit, Brian, and Tysha and I always give you kind of a hard time about this, about the one and done, that basically you'll show a buyer one house, write an offer, and get them the house. And that's not normal because most of the time, I know when I was looking for houses and, I went out and saw, 15, 20 different houses, and I'm doing my self-service business by going on Zillow, calling the realtor, whatever, yada, yada, yada. What do you do differently that creates the one and done?
Well, I'm not going to give you my secret sauce, but what I will tell you is you have to be lined up with the right partner. You have to be lined up with that buyer specialist who's only going to focus on finding that buyer the right home. So sitting down, putting together a blueprint, understanding your needs and wants, understanding what your family's motivation is, where you're trying to go, is going to be crucial to getting the one and done, because I can tell you that if we listen and we put that blueprint together and we go out the first trip, don't be surprised if you see the home that you guys have been dreaming of.
Because you've done your homework, though, right? Because you listened to the client
100%.
and you've heard what they said.
That's right.
And you've previewed the homes, and you're not taking them somewhere to waste their time.
That's right. I mentioned it to you when we spoke last time I was on the show, and I'm not just throwing a dart at a wall hoping I'm hitting a target. I have a target, and I know exactly what I'm looking for, and that's why I've been successful.
What if what you're looking for isn't actually available on the market at the moment?
Yeah, Dan, and I alluded this in our previous show as well, but creating that off-market inventory, there's so many different avenues we can go in really establishing and finding that product for our clients. So, yes, off-market, and yes, off-market, and it's also just really door knocking and creating that inventory.
So can I don't want to give away your secret sauce here, but let's just talk about this piece real quick. So when I go to list my home with Dan would come to my house and he walks around the house and he talks about it and and if you go to one of our home seller seminars, you'll hear the secret sauce that Dan does. We're not going to talk about that right now, but we have home seller seminars coming up. We've already got dates picked out. Feb 9th, 10th, and 11th.
Absolutely.
So we're super excited about that.
Can't wait.
Can't wait for those. But when I was going to look for a home to buy, basically I did the research myself and kind of like click, as Dan likes to talk about it on Zillow. But I mean, so do I just call you up on the phone and go, hey, dude, I'm looking for a 4-bedroom house, like a pool, like to be in like Santa Luz area, or do you have Dan has a process, right? Yeah. So, I mean, can you give us a little taste of your process?
Yeah, I mean, I sit down, I get down to really, again, the needs and wants of what my client's looking for, and we'll go through everything. The floor plan.
You do like a 2-hour consultation, right?
It's not 2 hours, but I'm there 2 hours if a client wants to sit and ask me as many questions as possible. Typically, the consultation is anywhere from about 45 minutes to an hour, but we're covering everything. We're also covering the transaction, the process, escrow. We're going through everything, but we spend a majority of our time really understanding what their needs and wants are. And if it doesn't exist, and I can tell you firsthand when I'm sitting down with these clients, if I know that it's going to be more like a needle in a haystack type of product we're looking for, that's when I basically move over to trying to create something that you wouldn't normally see on a Zillow, Trulia.
You know what I love about you having that consultation to begin with when you're working with a buyer is that, home buyers often just cut themselves short. Yet, if they were going to go work with an attorney, if they had some kind of legal case, what do? Like, you don't just call the attorney and then meet him at the courtroom and start pleading your case to the judge. Yeah. You actually go to their office, sit down, put a plan together, have a consultation, make sure he understands exactly the ins and outs of your situation, your needs, your
timing, everything. I mean,
all of it, all the way through and through. So when you're going out to buy a home, which is a pretty big deal, you're about to spend several hundreds of thousands of dollars in the San Diego market, possibly enter the $1 million range. Why would you make a phone call and start running around town like a chicken with your head cut off looking at homes when what you should be doing is sitting down that 45 minutes or so that you're going to commit to sitting down with somebody like Brian? That 45 minutes, if you're somebody that values your time, will translate into saving hours in the field looking at all the wrong stuff.
That's exactly
so. It's a very important process. It's something I'd encourage you to connect with us on. If you have that or any other questions, you can reach us. The number's 800-676-2420. 800-676-2420.
Yeah, I was just going to mention, I mean, this is what I specialize in. This is what I do. You get a lot of clients out there, a lot of buyers out there that are just really, they exhaust all their time and energy. I know what I'm doing. A buyer agent knows what he's doing. That's what we specialize in, and that's why you should trust us.
One of the cool things we should talk about is the home seller seminar again, which we did, which we're doing February 9th, 10th, and 11th. But one of the things that was super cool this week was that we closed a deal that Dan did the listing on, and then Brian sold them a house.
That plus, what is an as-is sale? Is it real? Does it exist? What are the pitfalls of one? We're going to answer everything there is to know about as-is sales and how you could avoid that trap. Back Back with you. Good morning. It's Real Estate Exposed here, News Radio 600 KOGO. Excited to be back with you for a third segment. I'm Daniel Beer of the Daniel Beer Group at Windermere, and my friend here, Todd Pianin.
I'm Todd Pianin from Home Street Bank, and we've got Brian Danney, our special guest from the Daniel Beer Group, his buyer specialist in the house.
How you doing, Brian?
Good.
Oh, it's been great having you so far. Everything you've been sharing with us is just really it's added a lot of value, so we appreciate it. And here's something that we face a lot, and it's the as-is sale. I think that the as-is sale is something that we want to discuss because we've been seeing a lot of we've been seeing a lot of sellers trying to pose a sale as an as-is sale. And then buyers trying to interpret, well, what does that mean for me? What rights do I then still have? Which rights do I not have? Does it mean I just eat it if it's not what I wanted to buy and have to buy it anyway, or I lose my deposit? So these are the questions we're getting. So let me start here.
Can you define an as-is sale for me, Dan?
Well, as-is, this is when somebody is, they're selling their home, and they say something along the lines of, okay, that's, we're accepting the price, we're accepting the terms, but just to let you know, this is going to be an as-is sale, meaning that when the buyer does their inspection and they ask for any repairs, there will not be any repairs. We're just going to sell it exactly as it is. Whatever's broken, whatever's not working, whatever termite issues, we're just going as is.
How often does that happen?
We've actually been having that happen quite a bit, especially lately, where sellers are trying to position their property as is. So here's what I tell a seller. And as a buyer, this information is just as valuable for you because you need to understand what rights you keep and which rights you don't. When a seller says, Dan, okay, let's go for it, but this is, I want this to be as is, here's what my response is. My response is that there is actually no such thing as is. As is doesn't really exist. Because when you could say it's as is, you could write that into the counteroffer or into the agreement. You could pose it that way. You could say as is till you're blue in the face. But the reality, and the way that it works here in California at least, is that even if you have said as is, the buyer still retains the right to inspect the property. Okay, the buyer retains the right to inspect the property. The buyer still has a right to make a request of you to fix whatever it is they want fixed, whether or not you wanted it as is. You then, as a seller, still then have the right to say no to their request, but the buyer still has the right to then cancel the deal.
I have a question.
And get their deposit back.
I have a question. So can I, as a seller, say, I'll accept your offer, but I'm not going to allow you to do a physical inspection on the property if I'm going to sell as is?
Can you deny them the right to access the property and do a physical inspection?
Can I have them release their physical inspection contingency as part of
That's the one thing that can be done is you can have them see if you're a seller and you actually truly want it to be as is.
Right.
Okay. That's literally the only way. The buyer has to release their contingencies up front as part of the deal so that they never actually have an investigation contingency starting from moment number one. Now, be aware, it's typically only going to be a cash buyer that's going to do that. And if that's happening, you're probably selling at a discount because it's going to be an entirely rare scenario. In 11 years,
and different time frame too.
Oh, absolutely. In 11 years of doing a lot of business, I've maybe seen that twice. Okay,
I see it on TV all the time.
Yeah, we all see it on TV all the time if you're watching $1 Million Listing or anything else. But the reality is that deals don't just get done while zipping down the road in Malibu on a cell phone. There's actually paperwork that gets done, believe it or not.
You don't hold the cell phone up when you're in your Rolls Royce and make a $8 million deal? That doesn't happen?
No, we only do that on Mondays, Todd.
Oh.
But the rest of the week we don't.
Dang.
No, look, if you're for as far as aside from some very, very specialized cases, as is, stating as is, okay, so long as the buyer still has a contingency period, which they do 99.9% of the time, it does not remove the buyer's right to inspect. It doesn't remove the right to request. You, of course, as the seller, can deny the request, but if you do so, the buyer has the right to cancel. So you have to ask yourself, is losing the deal worth avoiding, is losing a $500,000 deal worth avoiding $300 worth of handyman items? and keep your eye on the big picture.
Dan, I actually have a success story with that on the buy side. Recently, I negotiated a deal, and in the counters, we did receive an as-is. They weren't going to repair anything. My client was certainly upset, but coaching him through it, that we can still do our due diligence and investigate and have an opportunity to request repairs. And we were able to get past that. Although it said as is, we were able to negotiate, some reasonable repairs that really affected the functionality of the home. And in doing so, my client was happy, and we were able to get past that. So the point I'm trying to make is with the as is, the buyer always has the opportunity to still continue with their investigations. And if they do not feel comfortable with the house, they can still part ways without any financial penalty.
Absolutely. So most of the time, sellers that say it's as is, it's really just posturing. Yeah. It's really just trying to.
So posturing for you are they setting a stage for you, the realtor, to say, "Hey, man, I don't want to negotiate with any of your people"? Are they posturing? I mean, that would be my comment. Would be like me telling you list my house, but I'm gonna do it as is, and I'm not gonna do a stitch of repairs. I'm trying to control you as the listing agent.
Well, that's a whole nother part of the conversation. If fortunately for us, that's going to be a judgment call then that I'm going to make in the field. Is this somebody we want to be working with to begin with?
Right.
Okay, but it's really just posturing. And look, if you're using the as-is language and you understand it's posturing and you're just trying to send a message, trying to hopefully reduce the amount of repairs that get requested, then by all means, there are ways in which to strategically use the language. But I never enter into an agreement with a seller that, or I never, before we consummate a deal with a buyer, when I'm representing a seller, I make it very clear to the seller, we can say as is, but we haven't actually removed the rights from this buyer to do anything they want to do or request anything they want to request. Of course, Mr. Seller, it will be your option to agree or not agree, but just be aware that writing in as is doesn't just magically mean that the investigation period of the agreement is done, that there's not going to be an inspection, that there's not going to be termites. That's all still going to happen.
So can I ask this question? So if I do an as-is deal, we have a physical inspection done on the property, and I come to you, I ask the seller to do $15,000 in repairs, and the seller said, "Dan, I did the deal as is. I don't want to do any repairs." Can I as the seller cancel the transaction at that point?
Well, you can't actually cancel the transaction at that point. What you can do is deny the request. Okay, you can deny the request. And then that buyer has a contingency period where they have to remove their contingency for inspection at a certain point.
The standard is 17 days, worth noting.
The standard 17 days, right? So as those 17 days approach, you as the seller have just denied their request. That buyer's now left with a decision to make. Do I make a new request, maybe a lighter one, or do I just go ahead and cancel the deal completely, or do I remove contingencies and just buy the property anyway? Now,
and if the buyer cancels, sorry to interrupt, Todd, real quick, but if the buyer cancels, no financial penalty, and they certainly receive their EMD, their earnest money deposit back.
I get that, but my question is then if they've got 17 days, they could string me out for 17 days and it prevent you from remarketing the property, correct?
They can do that, yes.
So they could kind of mess with us.
They can
mess with the seller.
They can. Now, if your agent is starting to sense that that's happening, then 2 days prior to those 17 days, the contract allows for a notice to perform to be given. Then if on that 17th day that contingency is not released by the buyer, that will allow you as a seller to then officially cancel the deal on them.
Do I get the EMD money then?
Not if contingencies were not released. And in California, the buyer must release contingencies actively. So there's a difference between active removal and passive removal. Passive removal is when that 17th day arrives,
right,
and the contingency just kind of vanishes and floats away. In California, as far as the resale contract goes, because new home builders do operate with a different contract, so just be aware of that, FYI. But all resale, if you're using a California purchase agreement, but from the California Association of Realtors, the contingencies must be actively removed by signature. So you as a buyer actually have that deposit protected, and it can never just vanish away from you because you're aware of when you actually sign that protection away physically.
But Dan, just to let you know, that's also why it's so important to have a buyer specialist who's there to coach a buyer through the entire process, so they know the milestones that they're working with the 17 days and the 21 days.
That's exactly right.
Can I write into my counter offer to my buyer saying that on the 17th day that if you don't release your contingencies and I do a notice to perform that basically I take away the active ability so that I can take the earnest money deposit?
I've never seen it, and when we're talking about altering the nature of the contract, we would always take that to our attorneys.
Clear.
So I haven't seen that, but definitely that would be something to take to an attorney if we wanted that to go through. Now, if you have more questions on how to structure a counteroffer, you're going to sell your home. There's certain repairs you want to hopefully avoid doing or not doing, which, by the way, I'll even tell you here, as if you were my own client, that we will certainly want to disclose them. But that doesn't mean you necessarily have to do them or not. If you want to get the strategy in place for that, or if you're thinking of buying a home and want to connect with a true buyer specialist or figure out what loan you qualify for, don't qualify for, what will the payment be, which, by the way, we often find that your assumption is wrong, either to the high side or downside, then connect with us. The number is 800-676-2420. That's 800-676-2420. This is Real Estate Exposed, News Radio 600 KOGO, Todd Pianin, Home Street Bank, Brian Danney, buyer specialist at the Daniel Beer Group, and myself, Daniel Beer. We're going to be right back with you next on how to help you select all of the right services, such as title, mortgage, escrow, etc. How do you know who to use? Home warranty, termite. There's so much to it. There's more than you think. That's coming up next so you can make all the right decisions. God bless.
Welcome back to this beautiful Sunday. This is Todd Pianin from Home Street Bank. We got Dan Beer, founder, king of the Daniel Beer Group, and we also have Brian Danney from the buyer specialist from the Dan Beer Group in the house today. It's a beautiful Sunday. Thanks for joining us. One of the I got two of the best real estate agents in the city in the room, and I kind of want to ask both of them one question. The one question I want to know is, as a buyer or a seller, why should I use the vendors that you guys recommend? That could be escrow, title, mortgage, home warranty, termite. Because me, being a very, I always think the worst of everybody, I think you're getting kickbacks from these people. And so, my first inclination is going to go, no. I want to do my own shopping. I want to find my own mortgage. I want to use my own home inspector. These guys are giving you kickbacks. So let's start with you, Brian.
Sure.
Why is it, from the buyer side?
Well, this vendor list isn't just a group of people that we put together last week.
Do you get kickbacks from these people?
No, not at all. And the important thing to note is I've been in the industry in real estate now for a little over 9 years, and this list is compiled of the best professionals at their specialty. And we've obviously shaken up that list over time, but we're providing our clients with the best group of professionals that can get the job done. And that's what it comes down to, is that we know that these vendors can certainly deliver, meet all timelines, and it's essential to the process. Because what happens if they aren't able to deliver? What happens if we run into some sort of obstacle that falls on the buyer? And we really have to do a good job of representing them.
So, someone gave me an analogy yesterday, Brian, which I thought was funny. So when you go hire, when you're going to paint your house, you may get 4 bids to paint your house for the sake of argument, but are you going to then say to the painter, okay, so just paint this wall so I can get a bid from the other painter to paint the other wall? And then, it's like, so the question I really have is, you use the vendors you choose to use because they perform for you. Sometimes,
correct.
Sometimes they may not be the sexiest. Let's say in my case,
Todd, they're also the vendors that I would use personally, myself, if I was going through the process, which I have used.
Right.
I'm opening up the book to my plumber, to my electrician, to my inspector, to my lender, to everything. So it goes well beyond that.
So. Okay, so Dan, I propose a question back to you. I mean, why is it important for the clients to use the people you recommend when you do, when you're listing their house or the house gets in escrow?
Look, from my perspective, there's 2 things I'm doing there. One is I'm clearing my conscience that I've recommended good qualified professionals that we're.
One quick question: Do you get a kickback from your vendors?
No, no one in this industry does it. It's something that happened, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. That was common. That's why people still think it happens. It doesn't happen. It's entirely illegal. It's just not an issue. I guess that's not even a question I frequently face. So you asking me that, Todd, and asking Brian, Is that something that you feel like people actually, are weary of?
Oh, when you guys recommend people to us all the time, they say, what does Brian or Dan get out of this deal?
Okay, so we need to figure out how to make it very clear that there is nothing that's going to happen or not happen.
A smooth transaction. That's what we get,
That's exactly what we get. We have to make it very clear, Brian, then, just talking, I guess, between you and I here, going back to the office on how we can make it very clear that there is nothing that's going to change financially whether or not they use them. What is going to change is, especially on the lending side, there's a tremendous amount of delays happening because of the new regulations that hit the industry on October 3rd called TRID. And we're seeing every file delayed except for those that are with Home Street Bank. So we obviously want to keep you in compliance with the contract. There's a lot of implications actually that go pretty deep and into your pockets actually when you're starting to talk about delays that are going to run, past your loan rate lock, right? Because your rate is locked for a certain amount of time. And when those delays are taking you beyond that lock, it's going to cost you money. So we know that if you're working with a Home Street Bank, that's going to work out. We know that similarly, if you're working with certain plumbers or inspectors or termite or whatever it may be, that you're going to be in hands that at least we know we've suggested a professional company that we're very comfortable with. Now, obviously, the decision will be yours, but those are the reasons why we even take the time to do so, Todd. This is Real Estate Exposed. News Radio 600 KOGO. We've had an awesome time with you. There really isn't enough time to talk through all the different questions that people have that are going to have an impact on you, on the real estate industry, whether it's a purchase or the sale of a home going into 2016. We encourage you to connect with us. The phone number is 800-676-2420. 800-676-2420. Let's look at what's your personalized need and prescribe the right solution.
I'm Todd Piana from Home Street Bank, a member of the FDIC, equal housing lender, NMLS ID number 304014, and we're out of here. Great Sunday.